with the followers of Ross Perot. Frankly, I don't know which version of the Republican or Democratic Party is going to emerge as 2011 unfolds. For example, in the 2012 elections, 23 Democratic senators will be up for re-election and only 10 Republicans. At least at this juncture, the president, once considered to be invincible, must decide on how he is going to deal with a Republican-dominated House with at least 40 or so members who identify themselves expressly with the Tea Party movement. And almost all of the House Republicans are focused on some basic issues. First, repeal the health care reform legislation. Now, though I'm confident that all Republicans and some Democrats will vote for repeal early on in the early weeks of the 112th Congress, it will die very quickly in the Senate of the United States. But in the meantime, Republicans will make concerted efforts to dismantle or at least hobble any implementation of the bill through denying funding for either the Department of Health and Human Services or the Internal Revenue Service, where dollars are needed for implementation. Because you see, only $1 billion of the $10 billion that has been appropriated to implement the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. The bill calls for about 115 separate budget appropriations, which have not been done. The late Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia, a longtime force in congressional appropriations, put it this way. He described the power of the purse as, quote, one of the most defective bulwarks ever constructed, unquote, to shackle the hands of an overreaching executive. And having dealt with Senator Byrd on more than one occasion, I can assure you that he devoutly believed in the constitutional authority of the Congress to appropriate funds. There will no doubt be numerous hearings, numerous investigations related to not only implementation of the health care bill, but also to recent changes in what was called Wall Street reform. The expected chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, a guy named Darrell Issa, is aiming for 280 hearings per year. I can foresee fresh investigations into the bank bailout, the stimulus bill, potentially health care reform. But will House members overreach as they did in 1994? The expected Speaker of the House, John Boehner of Ohio, has talked about efforts to cut discretionary spending to 2008 levels that would save $100 billion the first year alone. How he and other House Republicans deal with a number of freshman members who are intent and believe that they were sent to Washington to dismantle President Obama's initiatives from the first half of his term may not be in a mood to compromise. Democratic Senate Leader Reid will have a much smaller hand with which to deal, as he will be required to follow the president's lead, though he may feel unshackled, frankly, because he won't have to deal with a Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and her extremely successful efforts to send legislation to the Senate, where it died a painful and sometimes untimely death. Speaking of painful deaths, I may be a bit premature in saying this, but the current proposal of the President's Deficit Reduction Commission will, assuming the commission approves the current provisions, meet a similar death once the recommendations arrive on Capitol Hill. So you can blow that off. And probably the most unheralded result of the elections, Republican gains of 680 state legislative seats and 6 net governorships. This will allow fellow partisans in Washington with partisans in the states, to control both branches of government in at least 25 states, which, by the way, is up from 9 in the cycle that was just concluded. There's this thing called redistricting, occasioned by the 2010 census, that will fit into this equation. The president has indicated some of what he'd like to accomplish in the last half of his term, such as overhauling the nation's immigration laws and passing energy and climate change legislation. It will take a lot of compromise on his part, I guarantee you, for comprehensive immigration reform to occur. And on the energy front, the so-called cap and trade approach passed by the House earlier can just be thrown out the window. Clean coal technology, maybe, Maybe nuclear power may be some areas where there can be agreement with Republicans in Congress and the president. And the same also might be true on trade agreements that have been sort of held up and long stalled, but the president will have some heavy lifting to do within his own party. If the president tries to accomplish by regulatory means that which Republicans strongly oppose, such as a new energy tax that is sort of like through the EPA or card check through the National Labor Relations Board, or changes to immigration laws through administrative amnesty or some sort of selective enforcement of our laws, you can be assured that opposition is going to rise up in Congress. So will the president blame Congress for what does or does not happen in the next Congress? Will he reach across the aisle to get things done in a bipartisan way, telling his party that he has to do it? Though I do not believe that either he or his advisors has any motivation to do the latter, because remember, it was merely a communications problem 10 days ago, not that the policies were not acceptable to a majority of the folks who participated in the midterm elections. On the other hand, in either scenario, it might just help his political standing going into his own reelection bid for 2012, especially if there are any noticeable improvements in our economy. But those improvements have to reach all the way into the lives and the living rooms of ordinary citizens. Failing that, the enthusiasm gap that was talked about during the most recently concluded midterm elections will find its way into those Iowa caucuses less than 15 months away, or Election Day in 2012. Now, will the president and his team better align his policies, his vision, his messaging with the majority of the American people so he can rebuild the trust that he's lost over the past year or so? Frankly, I believe that the president's approval rating come the fall of 2012 will determine his fate. If his approval rating is above 50%, he'll probably win re-election, no matter whom the Republicans choose to nominate. If it's below 47%, absent the presence of a formidable third-party candidate to siphon off anti-Obama votes, he'll lose. And with this new Tea Party, it's no telling what can occur over the next 2 years, much as it did over the last 2 years. You know, as one writer put it, on Election Day, the messy sport of politics turns very human. It's an emotional time and a clinical business, frankly. So the rules of living, you never know. You just never know. You miss a flight, you meet your wife. Today, you're running the West Wing of the White House. Tomorrow, you're begging the other side for tours. A wild victory can turn out to be ephemeral, or a crushing loss can lead to a greater glory. You know, you just never know. Thanks much. Thank you.
You ready, Fred?
Depends on whether you're going to use it. You sound like my new partners.
Get used to it, mate. We're taking over the world.
Y'all spell funny too.
You call that a knife?
Oh, okay. All right, have at it.
Okay, first question is, we're going to draw on your 6 years as Regent of Texas A&M University. You're clearly an intellectual. Brad Fields is all excited about this new movie coming out on Saturday called Runaway Train by Denzel Washington. So his question for you is, if a train was leaving LA at 3 a.m. and a train was leaving New York at 6 p.m, now you've got to understand they're both Central Standard Time, Fred, okay? Where would they be when Congress decides to balance the budget?
So like, is this a coal-powered or a steam-powered train?
Mate, you're the one that's closer to Congress.
And where does the track end?
Well, is it a fast train or a slow train?
It don't make no difference. It's going to be a while before, you know, really, we've had balanced budgets, by the way, in case y'all haven't remembered it. And a lot of the balanced budget time, I mean, we did some controls and stuff as during the latter part of the first Bush administration, and then there had been like Graham-Rudman and Graham-Rudman hollowings and all these kinds of things which control Congress's at least ability to spend on the discretionary front. We did some floors and ceilings, particularly on defense spending in our 1990 budget deal where the president, we didn't call it raising taxes, but when the president allowed something to take place that we endorsed that had revenue enhancement in it. It's a term of art.